Hello students, welcome to the class. Today we will talk about autobiographical elements in David Copperfield. This is Anand Bhushan Pandey, an assistant professor in PG Department of English, Veer Kumarsi University, Ara. This class is dedicated to the students of MA Semester 2 and the paper is CC 9th. That is 19th century fiction and non-fiction. In this paper in unit 4 you have to read a novel that is David Copperfield written by Charles Dickens. So let us start with the class. I have divided my class into these 4 components and they are David Copperfield, the novel, a general introduction. Then we will talk about in general David Copperfield as an autobiographical novel. Then we will talk about autobiographical elements in the novel. And in final we will have some concluding remarks. So let us start with the novel David Copperfield. David Copperfield was written by Charles Dickens, who was one of the finest storytellers of the Victorian age. Dickens took himself very seriously as a social reformer because his novels throw light on many of the evils of his age. The novel was written during 1849 to 1850 and published in monthly installments of a magazine, as it was in fashion those days to get the novels published in installments in some or the other magazines. And this was published from the installment of 1st May 1849 to 1st November 1850. The first single volume edition of the novel appeared in 1850, and in his preface to the 1869 edition of the novel, Dickens wrote, and this quotation will prove the importance of this novel for the writer himself. He says he writes in the preface, "Of all my books, I like this the best. I have in my heart of hearts, a favorite child, and his name is David Copperfield." Subsequently, this novel proved to be the favorite of a large majority of novel-loving readers. So let us talk about David Copperfield as an autobiographical novel. David Copperfield is said to be the autobiographical book in inspiration. What does it mean? It means it is by no means a complete autobiography, because in the real sense of the term, in an autobiography, the author writes the story of his own life, the incidents of his own life. It is in fact a true account of the author's life. But David Copperfield is not a complete account of Dickens's life. Still, we have to note it down that it does contain a record of Dickens's own experiences during his childhood and youth in a very thinly disguised form. Dickens has put actually much of himself into the portrayal of David Copperfield. As we go through the book, we find that a large number of incidents and happenings in the life of David Copperfield correspond to those of Dickens himself. Many incidents in Dickens' own life have been incorporated into the account of David's life. Now we will talk about the autobiographical elements in the novel one by one. And the first that we will discuss about that Dickens's own experiences as the son of a debtor. As if you go through the life sketch of Charles Dickens, you find that Dickens's father, whose name was John Dickens, serves as a model for the portrayal of Mr. Micawber in the novel. He was a debtor like Mr. Micawber, who John Dickens's father, was a debtor like Mr. Micawber, and like Mr. Micawber, his father, John Dickens, was arrested and put behind the bars for not repaying his debts. The second topic that we will talk about, that Dickens's hopeless love affair with a girl by the name of Maria Beadnell. Dickens fell in love with Maria Beadnell, but he suffered the pangs of disappointment and frustration in that love affair in his own life. The effect of the breakdown of this love affair on Dickens was intense, and it finds its echo in the novel in David's love affair with Miss Dora Spinlow. We get a vivid account of David's alternating hope and despair that Charles Dickens himself felt in his own life. Though here there is some dissimilarity, because in the novel they finally get married, that is, David and Dora get married, but in actual life Dickens could not marry Maria Beadnell. The next element that we can have some resemblance is Dickens's misery as a student at Wellington House Academy. David's feeling of desolation at the mismanaged Salem House Academy in the novel is based on Dickens's own experiences at Wellington House Academy. The portrayal of Mr. Creakle, the owner of Salem House, is based on William Jones, who was the headmaster of Wellington House Academy. This headmaster, like Mr. Creakle, was a stern man who made frequent use of his cane. The third element is his sense of degradation, Dickens's sense of degradation when working in blacking factory. When David's father was put behind the bars for not repaying the debt, this was a kind of very tension for this was a kind of financial pressure that the family underwent. So to relieve the financial pressure of the family, Dickens had to work in Jonathan Warren's blacking factory. The job of covering of pots of paste blacking with oil paper was very tedious. Being a sensible boy, Dickens found it impossible to reconcile himself to the job. All this finds place in the novel when in chapter 11 David tells us that he was a shabby child, insufficiently and unsatisfactorily fed, and he experienced a deep sense of undeserved degradation and led a miserable life. So these two incidents are they do resemble, that is, the Dickens's and the David's. The next element that we are going to talk about is Dickens's struggle to learn shorthand and his ultimate mastery of it. Dickens really had to toil to learn shorthand, and this experience also is attributed to David, who had to work very hard to learn this art. Now the last element is Dickens's fame as a novelist. This too was Dickens's own experience, which finds place in the novel David Copperfield. So when it comes to the concluding remarks about David Copperfield as an autobiographical novel, though we see that the resemblance of certain incidents and some characters in the novel with certain aspects of Dickens's own life is very close, yet there are many fictitious characters in the novel and many imaginary happenings with which Dickens had nothing to do in his life. The novel, therefore, may be treated as an attempt to take stock of himself emotionally and artistically, but at the same time, we must guard against treating the novel as a literal autobiography. So, this is not a literal autobiography, this is not an autobiography in the real sense of the term, but still, we can go far as saying that it is an autobiography in inspiration. And that's all. Thank you.